Alanna, I have to think that there are a lot of people out there who would love to start their own network, and again, call it whatever you'd like, but they just don't know where to start. What would you say to them? What would you recommend that they do if they wanted to build a network? And it doesn't have to be, women in safety. It can be anything. Yeah, but what it's really showing is bringing community together and supporting one another. So do you have a playbook, or do you have some words for us of what you can do if you want to do this?
I probably have a bit of a skewed view on it, to be fair. I appreciate that we work in geographically different areas, right? And that means we have different risks. But I think there is not one standard across the world that says this is what a professional stands for. And Andreas, apologies, I don't know your full career story, but I know Megan in particular, having worked across many geographic locations.
I think we disconnect the purpose of this professional, the health and safety profession. The purpose, what is the purpose? Clive mentioned something that inspired me. Safety 1, Safety 2, Hobby. This is just models. Heinrich, Frank Bird is just model. What moving? Trust and care. So what is the real purpose? To connect people. And sometimes, we are fighting because it's just models, methodologies, it's philosophy.
Welcome back to Headline Podcast with me, Dr. Megan Tranter, and my co-host, Andreza Arahu. And today's conversation is about something that we don't really talk enough about in safety, and that is community and recognition. Because safety grows stronger when people feel connected and cared for, not when they're buried under more processes. And that's exactly why we're so thrilled that Alanna Ball, the founder of the Women in Safety and the Hunter Safety Awards from Australia, has dedicated her career to building. Through the Women in Safety, she's created this amazing, thriving network that now reaches across Australia, New Zealand, and even beyond. And through the Hunter Safety Award, she's given organisations and individuals the platform to be recognised for excellence in health, safety and well-being. So I'm thrilled to have Alanna here. And actually, just a quick note, although we will say hello to her in just a second. Alanna's podcast was the first podcast that I ever appeared on just over a year ago. So what a delight that she's now here on Andreza and my podcast, and we're talking about such an inspiring topic. So hello, dear friend. Hi, Alanna.
Hello, how are you doing? And what a podcast it was. We covered lots. I feel like we probably maybe could have even split it over 2 or 3 podcasts. So it's lovely to be here and to see you both today.
Welcome, Alanna. So let's start with your story. So I'm interested in knowing what inspired you to found Women in Safety.
Yeah, it was a really interesting journey, to be fair. So many have kind of heard me speak, and I feel like sometimes you need to kind of look back to look forward, right? And so my background was HR. I left school. I grew up in a mining kind of industry town in central Queensland. And I watched both my parents off working, my dad in heavy industry, my mum was a teacher, and started to see as I started finishing school, my friends going off to work, friends getting hurt at work, they were doing apprenticeships and things like that. And I was like, I want to help people in their career. Thought I'd study organisation psychology. That was not for me. There was too many dots to button and too many T's, and if you didn't get the referencing, it was not my thing. And so went into HR. Worked in HR for quite some time, worked overseas in London, worked through a number of different organisations in Australia, and then one day was sitting there and going, do you know what, I feel like there's more to this. Started in health and safety, great career, loved it. But I really quickly felt isolated in my community. So when I was first kind of came out of this HR career, that I had an incredible network of people that I could knock on the door and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or how would you overcome this? Or have you seen a policy or procedure? Or, how would you navigate this from a HR perspective? Keeping in mind I was, early 20s. And then jumped into safety, really high risk role, exploration drilling in Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Indonesia, Mongolia, and faced with some really unique challenges that I can tell you now my university degree had no scope on. So I wanted a network, went to a couple of traditional networking opportunities and was faced with people who don't look like me, don't think like me. They were middle-aged men who had been in safety for a long time and really weren't open to this idea of saying, I don't know all the answers. I don't know what I'm doing here. I might be really qualified, but guess what? There's some really unique hazards here, and I'd like to understand if anyone else is faced with these. So I decided I would start, it's that whole, if you can't see it, how do you create it? So created an opportunity that other women like me could perhaps come together and to ask those crazy questions and to say, I've got no clue what I'm doing. And I thought it would be 3 or 4 of us having a nice wine or margarita, catching up. And all of a sudden it grew legs. And, other people said that, hey, I feel seen for the first time in my career. I need that support. I want those conversations. And, here we are years later, doing all sorts in the women in safety community. But essentially, I started it from very selfish needs of wanting to find people to connect with that looked like me and thought like me, and that it wasn't about procedure and process. It was about people. So that was the very beginning.
Did you ever imagine all these years later that it would be what it is now? Because it's big, right?
Never in a million years did I think this. You're like, oh, where will you be in 5 years' time? 5 years ago, I was deep in diapers with the kid. The twins weren't even born yet. I had no clue what was coming on my horizon, and not once. So I'm grateful every single day that I get to lead a community of incredible professionals who I hope through my own leadership they feel that they can be vulnerable to and ask those questions and not feel that they have to put up a face and pretend to know the answer.
But returning at this point when we start, what is the major challenges you face to creating this community?
Do you know what I think the biggest challenge has been? Self-doubt. Because, we are still in a lot of organizations and work with a lot of organizations that are led by the men who do not want, women's voice to be heard. That's the reality. So I feel like self-doubt and imposter syndrome is my biggest challenge personally. On a more, broader front, I think showcasing and having the data that shows why, if we support women, particularly in the field of health and safety, the impact we can make. Because, I feel like from that, I want to call it the maternal instinct. If we as at our core level, right, at a chemistry, biochemical makeup kind of thing, we have that maternal instinct. And I think if we apply that and all the stories in the Women in Safety podcast really link back to that care and, want to look after people at a core. We're not the process driven. We come at it from a very unique lens. And I feel like the biggest challenge is showcasing just how vital women are in this space and how do we leverage that better across industries that, perhaps women have not necessarily been seen in that space before.
And what do you consider an authentic network? Because the community works in a network workplace, right? What do you consider an authentic network?
Oh, I don't even know where do I start with that answer? Look, I think for me, an engaged network in terms of women in safety is very much sharing the stories, the lessons learned, right? So we have platforms within the women in safety community in particular where we can, I had one come up this morning about, look, I really want to get into construction safety, but I don't know construction. Is there a toolkit that says, I'm not going to turn up to a construction site and I don't know how to get there. And all of a sudden we've got a community that says, look, let's work together on this, or how could I show you, what could I give you? What offerings can I have, right? This openness and willingness to say, look, I don't have all the answers, but I'm happy to let you know what I know. And for me, that engagement and that connection means that we learn things so much faster than, necessarily going down these really formal pathways. So I feel like, the engagement, they take the stories back to their workplace. The stories come from their workplace and they share that with other individuals who might be looking to move into that. So, I think the engagement for me has just been about openness and about learning more so than anything else.
It sounds like that's what makes this community so beautiful and supportive. I'd love to know, if we were a fly on the wall in those webinars or conversations, smaller group conversations that folks are having, what are they telling one another?
Do I let out all the secrets today or what? Maybe you don't have to be a fly on the wall. Maybe you should join us on one. Look, I think for me the key things that I guess I hear fairly consistently is the backup, is the support. We had a lady who, she was on a particular, she'd been hired by an organisation, and she, in this particular conversation, and I think it's one that will always stay with me, right? Because at the core of what I wanted to achieve in women in safety, this conversation hits the nail on the head for, I can walk away knowing that even I helped one person and that's all I cared about, right? But so this one lady turns up, she's talking about, in this case, she was in construction, and she said she had been made my words. There was a comment made on site that she only got her role in health and safety because it was a diversity hire. And, if she was a man, she wouldn't have got the job. And she was like, I feel like wherever I go, my qualifications, and highly trained health and safety professional, mind you, great longevity of career, really great skills, incredible at speaking, but all of a sudden is self-doubting herself that maybe I am a diversity hire. Maybe I did only get this because I'm a woman, and I can stay quiet because the rest of the network picked her up and told her all the examples where you have longevity of career, you've got an incredible skill set. Would a man ever question if they were a diversity hire? Absolutely not. You are hired because you're an incredible professional at what you do. And for me, that conversation, and it does get giving me goosebumps again now, to hear an entire community back her when she felt so isolated in her workplace, she doesn't feel isolated anymore. And having been the only female on many sites, knowing that there's a community that if I had a rough day, that I could rock up and say, today sucked. Today was really hard, or these comments were made, whatever. I've had the comments about, are you going to bake us a cake, love, or are you going to do the coffee run? And it's like, I am, 3 degrees plus through university, and you want me to be buying you coffee? Like, excuse me, I am more than that. And the community absolutely have each other's back to learn, to support, to empower and inspire one another. And as I said, I can walk away happy knowing that in some way, shape or form, I achieved that.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andresaaraujo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
You were recognized for women in safety. What does this mean to you?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, right? Because I still, to this day, I go, I'm not doing anything special, right? And then there's moments like this where you go on a podcast and you talk about it and you're like, oh, actually, like it's kicking some goals. It's pretty cool. It's similar to the challenges though, right? Because I feel like there is still the imposter syndrome of, for me, it's not about me. Yes, okay, I lead it, but, and yes, recognition is great for me, but I want the recognition for our members. If I could take my face off it and absolutely push all of them to the front and showcase every single one of them and show them that what they're doing matters in their organizations, that is better recognition in my head than, whether I'm on a podcast or whether I'm known as Women in Safety. I want all of them known for what they're delivering. So, call that what you want. But for me, the recognition is beautiful and I love it, but I want every single one of them recognized, to be fair.
Alanna, I have to think that there are a lot of people out there who would love to start their own network, and again, call it whatever you'd like, but they just don't know where to start. What would you say to them? What would you recommend that they do if they wanted to build a network? And it doesn't have to be, women in safety. It can be anything. Yeah, but what it's really showing is bringing community together and supporting one another. So do you have a playbook or do you have some words for us of what you can do if you want to do this?
Megan, I do not have a playbook. However, I think if you haven't looked it up, there is a YouTube, there was the TEDx, and I feel like you'll nod your head as soon as you hear this, there was the how to build a following. And that there's a TEDx and and there's the guy at the festival and he gets up and dances and the TEDx speaker says something about, at the moment he's alone, he looks crazy because he's up there dancing. And all it took was that first follower to say, he looks crazy, he looks like he's having a good time, I'm going to join him. And then all of a sudden he's got 3 or 4 came down and by the end you see this, massive people dancing like crazy people. Hooray, right? I feel like very similar concept applies, to be fair. And did I set out to have the mass? No. I think it's about finding people who are like-minded, right? Who believe that what you're saying or what you want to do or, for whatever reason you want to start that community, that there's a shared value. And you will already know who those people that have that shared value is. And once you float the idea by one, they're probably already on board. And then the next person sees that, hey, these 2 people think just like me. I want to be a part of that because I feel seen and heard and my story resonates with that, right? And it's, for me, always going to be about if the story resonates, then they will follow that story. Not everyone will follow the story of women in safety and will not join as a member. I'm perfectly okay with that. But I always say, find the community that does resonate with you, because when you have beliefs and you have values and you can share them, how much more of an impact it makes, not only to you as an individual and your own mental health and, being a part of something bigger than yourself, but I think also how much the impact is on whatever cause, value, belief system that community backs, right? So for me, it's about finding those people who have that like-mindedness, that shared belief, value, whatever it might be, and just start talking to them about it, because you will soon see that you're not the only one that's having those thoughts or feelings or even emotions that sit behind that shared value.
And I guess as well, it doesn't have to be figured out at the beginning, doesn't it? I think a lot of people think these days, oh, well, I have to be super professional and I have to have a website and this fancy thing and that fancy thing. But community is more than that.
It could be a text message group. It doesn't matter what platform it's happening on. And I look at, if you open my phone, you can see Facebook groups of or messenger groups of, one is called Mums Club, and it is a group of us, like-minded, similar age kids. We've got a shared value, a shared stage of life, and we connect over kids and schooling and all of that, right? That might not serve me in the next 5 years, but right now it's something that I'm connected to and have a shared value. We don't have a website for that. That's just us connecting, right? So I think the definition behind community is so varied. It could be 5 of you, it could be 500 of you. And I think it doesn't have to be perfect, but sharing that knowledge, that information, connecting and growing together is the core to any community.
But talking about women in safety, so what do you feel that, not just not talking about women's safety, but do you feel that women have been well represented in the field over the years?
I would say when I first started, no, absolutely not. I found it really hard to find, incredible women to learn from in particular. To be fair, I didn't know of the Megan Trantis of the world when I started my career, right? Yet inspiring. Yeah, hi, I'm here. The problem, it's me. But I think the world of social media has allowed more visibility of, not only, hey, there are other women doing this, I could possibly see this as a career, but I feel like we're definitely moving somewhere now, from, as I said, from when I started back in the olden days, compared to now. I feel like there's a lot more representation of women in these particular roles. And I think based on some conversations, in particular with, say, recruiters here in Australia, there are many times that, the organisation will, almost slip the note under the table, or they'll message me and say, we can't obviously advertise for a woman, but we feel like based on our culture and where we need to head and, what we need for this role, we feel like a woman would be better suited to this role. So I feel like we are getting more visibility and it is growing, but certainly in some industries, which we know, those industries are still vastly underrepresented by women. So I think that will be across the board, not just in health and safety.
There was a statistic that came out of ASSP, and, Andreza and I talked to Pam Wolaski, the past president of ASSP, and I can't remember the statistic, but the percentage of women in safety is still remarkably low. And I think for all three of us here, we've been in this profession now for decades, and it still surprises us. Well, I'll speak for myself. Still surprises me that it's not at parity yet. And so to me, I'd love to remember that statistic. Maybe I'll look it up and put it in the show notes or something. You have it?
It's quite funny because I have the report that the ASSP did on measuring the gender gap at work in the safety profession. Now, I have it saved as a bookmark because I just think it was such an incredible report for me to learn from in particular. And it basically said women only make up 22% of professionals who have earned the Certified Safety Professional designation according to the BCSP. And Pam's name is in there. But yeah, again, that was 2018. I do think we've moved a long way, but at the time of that report, it was 22%. So, yeah, look, we've got work to do, definitely.
Brazil is 20%. 20% safety is the presence of the women. So it's very slow, the representatives.
Yeah, right. Yeah, crazy.
And here's what's super interesting is that the modern way, I think, that people are talking about health and safety is one about trust and care. And how well does that fit, with what we were talking about here? So we seem to be going away a little bit from, not deserting, but going away a little bit from, say, an engineering control or a management system control to one where we're thinking more about human beings and people. And so I can't help but wonder whether you see a future where more women get into health and safety, and what would it take to encourage them to go into this profession?
Yeah, it's one that I rack my brains, and there's a few parts to that. So I think the first part, I have to say, imagine being that minority and then someone like me telling them to please put your hand up for an award that says you're doing really well in this. Crickets come out, right? It is really, really challenging for them to put their hand up and say, I want to be recognized for the work I'm doing in this. That's challenging in itself. The other challenge, and one of the biggest things, and the women in safety community hear me rant about this all the time, is the next generation do not see this as a viable career. Wow. So when they're in school, I don't know what it's like over there, but we've got several universities who are no longer offering the Bachelor in Occupational Health and Safety or even a master's program because the uptake is poor. One of the things I'm looking at doing is how do we make it look appealing? And obviously my lens is very much to the next generation of women. How do we show them that it is a really viable career and there's so much variety? And again, I speak to the anecdotal of the Women in Safety podcast that there is very few. Out of 100, I'm going to say I've had 2 that have left school and said, I'm going to work in health and safety. Were you one of them, Megan?
No, my story is a really funny one. Do you remember my story? It's that my dad was in the army and we were moving states, and I didn't want to move, as any 18-year-old doesn't want to leave their friends. So my dad actually enrolled me in an undergraduate degree in health and safety. And then because I didn't have any money, as an 18-year-old, I had to follow the family and moved to this other state that they were going to live in, and that's where I studied. So no, it was never my choice either, which is why I find it so funny that it was your choice and your passion, because it was not mine.
Well, it wasn't. I left school and wanted to do org psych because I was like, what makes people why do they show up to work? Why are we so committed to this thing? Like, can't we all live in the Bahamas sipping cocktails? Like, why are we committed to work? What makes us make different choices in the workplace? I had captured that as HR, and now I obviously think about it again and go, well, for me, that's the fundamental of health and safety. Anyway, but yeah, so I feel like for the most part, I've had 2 that have actively said, I'm going to choose it as a career from school. So what is the gap or what is the message that's being sold to them at a school level that this is not a viable career for them?
I think we disconnect the purpose of this professional, the health and safety profession. The purpose, what is the purpose? Clive mentioned something that inspired me. Safety 1, safety 2, hobby. This is just models. Heinrich, Frank Bird, it's just model. What moving? Trust and care. So what is the real purpose? To connect people. And sometimes, we are fighting because it's just models, methodologies, it's philosophy. So what is the
How
core
someone
value?
gets there, how someone gets to that result shouldn't matter. If it was the way we did it 15 years ago, that might be fit for the organization we're in now or supporting now, whatever that looks like. And I say to people, if zero harm fits you right now, and that's what gets you trust and that's what gets you care, who am I to tell you that that's the wrong approach? Who am I to tell you that's the wrong methodology? It should be a journey, and how we get there, it needs to be varied because every organization has different people, and the culture of that organization is different.
Yeah, depend the context. So we need to analyze this. But I think this could be one obstacles. So what we can add in a list of obstacles that the women is facing in health and safety today to grow in your career?
Yeah, well, I definitely think visibility. I think it's that whole you can't be what you can't see. And I feel like even my current mentee is like, oh, no, I talked to her about updating her LinkedIn. She's doing amazing work. And she's hiding behind this, oh, I couldn't possibly, oh, no, I don't want to be self-promoting on LinkedIn. I said, well, if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. And this, and again, I talk about that imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is such a huge obstacle that I could speak to the community about every single day. And I feel like I could, continue that imposter syndrome just absolutely kicks their butt.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andresaraujo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I haven't heard that saying before. You can't be what you can't see. It's really powerful, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
So then how do we encourage women in particular? And actually you could broaden this out. You could say anyone who has imposter syndrome. And, sometimes that's when you're early in your career. Sometimes that's when certain things have happened to you that have made you question, who you are and what you've achieved and so forth. So what have you seen? Because I know that you talk to a lot of people and, we're talking about these obstacles, yet surely there are some solutions as well for people.
Yeah, and I would agree there, Megan, just quickly. Imposter syndrome is not gender specific. And I have seen this play out for some incredible male leaders, male counterparts. So imposter syndrome is not biased just towards women by any means, unfortunately / fortunately. So how do we start to fix it, right? So I think there's a couple of things. I think where we have incredible leaders who feel that they can speak up is to be vulnerable, right? Is to say, I don't have all my ducks in a row? How do we outwardly show that it's okay to balance life and work? How do we, I think, again, it is that we can't be what we can't see. Who are the women that can advocate then, and encouraging them and talking to them? And you two are great examples of this, is to say, hey, we're doing a podcast and we just want to share conversations. I think that in itself, shows that we can do it. And hey, I want to start a podcast about this. These two did it. I've got one. The more that we see it, the more we can be it. So if you feel that, for anyone listening, how do you advocate for others? And my mentor, I will never forget it. One of the first kind of things she said to me was, be a Rapunzel and not a drawbridge woman. And that was about, when you get to the top of the castle, throw your hair down for the next. Throw the lessons learned, how you got there, throw that hair down. Don't get to the top and pull that damn drawbridge up, because that's stopping, someone who was so close to getting over that bridge, and you just pulled that out from underneath them, right? For me, that statement is glued to the front of my mind. And I reflect on early in this year, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I have shared a lot of that on LinkedIn. And, I get this, oh, you're so brave for sharing. Well, hang on a minute. We're in health and safety, where we should be showcasing that we're a whole person. And, I don't have all my ducks in a row by any means. There's probably some ducks running around the backyard packing up my dog for all I know. They are not in a row. And if we don't share it, and if we don't be vulnerable and say, this affects me and this is how it showed up, the concept of me being brave in that never sat well with me, because hang on, we need to practice what we preach. And so for me, I will always advocate for others sharing their journey, their story, and showing that they are human, because the people that we serve in health and safety are human. So if we can't be human as leaders and show that, and I think, again, I go back to you can't be what you can't see. If someone else sees someone being a mere human and showing up, warts and all, imagine how powerful that is to that imposter syndrome of someone looking and saying, I couldn't ever do that. It's like, no, they couldn't ever do that. And I reflect on a podcast episode I did from someone who worked in a Big Four. So Amy was ex-Big Four. When her and I had a conversation years ago about being recruited into that firm, I was like, at the time, my brain went, I could not possibly, because I do not have a wardrobe full of designer clothes. That is why I said I could not possibly work there. She turns up in her pajamas on a Zoom call. And I was like, oh, she's human. Maybe I could do this. And that, to me, was the game changer. How do we show up as human? And how do we encourage everyone else to be human? Because we all go to sleep, we all wake up, we all go to the toilet, we all get sweaty from time to time. We've got to show up as human. That was a very long-winded answer. You're welcome.
Do you know something that struck me was, and I have seen you talking about your ADHD, but what struck me is I'm hearing more and more people talking about neurodiversity. And I think it's amazing that people are talking about this more. Are you hearing more people talking about it as well? It's often that thing that if you see when you want a red car, all of a sudden you see the red cars driving along. Yeah. And I don't know if that's it, but even some health and safety professional organisations, they're writing white papers on neurodiversity and health and safety. And I think in context, what they're doing is talking about the impact that this has, positive and negative, on the difficulty or ease in having a healthy and safe workplace.
It's humanising the workforce. That's all it's doing. We can write white papers till we come home, but all we're doing by talking about neurodiversity is humanising our workforce. We are not robots, and the sooner we recognise that we are dealing with humans, imagine the outcome of that. Imagine the white papers we'd write if we just wrote that they're human and they're going to come to work. They might have not slept well. They might have neurodiversity. They might be struggling financially and that's impacting them. They might have had a fight with their partner. Their toddler annoyed them. Again, we could write white papers on all of that, but at the end of the day, you could write, you're human. Simple.
What do you feel? I'm interested here to know your opinion. What do you feel is missing for professionals to advance your career in health and safety?
I don't know. I probably have a bit of a skewed view on it, to be fair. I appreciate that we work in geographically different areas, right? And that means we have different risks. But I think there is not one standard across the world that says this is what a professional stands for. And Andreas, apologies, I don't know your full career story, but I know Megan in particular, having worked across many geographic locations, what a safety professional is and how we learn from one another. I think that for me is what is missing. There seems to be a hesitation between, say, Australian health and safety bodies and American health and safety bodies. Canadian, it's almost the walls kind of come up and go, like, oh, maybe they're doing it a bit better, or, why would we not lean over the wall and say, how did you guys get this through? Again, I think about in the women in safety community, we say we're dealing with this really unique risk. Did anyone else do it? How did you overcome it? What did consultation look like? Imagine if we had this program where it's like, let's learn from each other because you've progressed this health and safety, but there's how many acronyms do you need for all the different associations for health and safety across the globe? It confuses the bejesus out of me. Which one is the source of truth? Which one is going to make me the better professional? Which certification do I go for? Is this the gold plated? Will you ask someone else and that's the, bronze plated? So for me, I think there is not one rule for all, and it may not ever be able to happen. But I think the more we network outside of our own comfort zone, and the more we look at even other professionals. So I quite often talk about, why do we not have IT in the room and go, hey, IT, you are not a revenue generating part of the business. How do you sell a strategy? How do you overcome consultation and communication? How do you get board buy-in? What happens when the board doesn't approve what you do? Cybersecurity is vital to a business. So is the health safety security. So how do we utilize and tap into these other mindsets or mind frames or methodologies that are being used in finance or in IT or those kind of things? Let's collaborate more broadly. And I think collaboration in our profession across oceans, but also across counterparts, I think will advance careers quickly.
Perfect. Wow.
Because it nearly feels like a paradox in my mind. What you're getting to here is something really big, Alanna, because if we say health and safety is about caring for people, and earning trust with people, surely, as you say, we're all human beings. Surely there's something that we can find in common throughout the world with this. Yet there's something that's holding us back from doing it. I can't help but wonder, is it the old compliance approach originally where, it was easier to put up these walls to say, well, my legislative approach in this country is this and someone else says theirs is different. But I'm curious what we can do to break down those walls, to build stronger networks and to learn from one another. Is there something that you've seen that has worked really well with that?
And look, it was interesting because I asked recently what on LinkedIn I asked, like, well, you know, what are the current skills that you think a current safety professional need? And there was people outside of health and safety responding to that, right? You had the people come up and say, there's the, what's the framework? There's the framework and it's like a 7-piece. I can see all the pieces of the pie and it's the professional and it's got all the levels associated with it that what we would expect of a senior level and the qualifications. I think that framework covers it to some extent. But I think, again, it was interesting that some people went down this really, there's already a framework, why are you asking this question, to then the people who put some really humanized words to what skills a safety professional need. And as I said, some of them were not safety professionals. I just found that really interesting that some went straight to the framework and you think that's the policy, the procedure, the guiding light, and some went to a human and bringing human skills to it. So, look, I don't have the answer, but I think the frameworks that we have, it's the international, I'm going to kick myself, I'll think of it, but they have there's a professional development framework or something, and I think it's a good starting point, but I think how adaptable is it given how fast the world is changing? So, yeah, don't have the answers, but that's pie in the sky. Would love to get there one day.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andresaraújo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
I will explore more your community, okay? At this moment in your community, who looks for women in safety? So what is the like not background, you know, but the
So who are they? Who is in there? Yeah, look, really, really varied, which is why I love it, because you've got people who are sole traders out on their own as a consultant that just wants community, right? And similar to myself, I work from home 100% of the time, other than a few kind of visits here and there, that they are just looking for that connection and that community of like-minded people. You've got people who are the sole health and safety professional, could be early stages of their career or they're fairly late stage of their career. You've got health and safety executives down to students. So all sorts of industries, but yeah, very varied. I feel like just, again, it goes back to, it doesn't matter where, you know, what your title is. At the end of the day, the community is there because you've got shared beliefs and shared values. So for me, the titles don't matter of who sits in there, because everyone, if they're sharing that value, they will be there.
And one thing I remember seeing with women in safety in particular, you had an awards ceremony, or you've had a few of them, and I think you were awarding people for mentorship and that sort of thing as well. And actually we had Lisa Fain on the podcast. She's the president of the I'm probably going to butcher it, but like International Mentoring Association, something like this. And I learnt so much from her about different ways of thinking about mentoring. But I'd love to know your perspective. How do people in women in safety appreciate or think about mentoring, and how are they using it themselves in their careers?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and it's an interesting year for us in this space. So I have always said from the beginning of my career that mentors have played such a big part in almost, if I think about it, is overcoming the imposter syndrome piece as well. That they're the ones who I can come with the self-doubt, and they present well, what if you thought about it like this, right? So that's not the only thing that mentors have provided, but I feel like that has certainly stuck with me as far as reframing where, that little inner voice says I couldn't apply for that job, or, that's well above my pay grade kind of thing. So there's an element of that. And so when the Women in Safety Awards came around, I definitely said that mentors should be celebrated, because I definitely feel like even informally in the women in safety community, the mentoring that happens within the community, just the even the small kind of little dribs and drabs of it, are absolutely valuable. To then, we got approached by McConnell Dow, so a construction contractor here in Australia, to partner with us. And one of the things that I wanted them to partner with was a formalized mentoring program. And that's our first. We only kicked that off this year. So if I reflect on how the women in safety community have approached this, in this case, the structured mentoring program, the things that they've overcome and the challenges very much have been, I want to get here in my career. How could I do it? What could I do differently? Am I presenting myself the best way that I can? And we know that, for example, LinkedIn is if that's the first place people are going to connect with you, how are you showing up in that space? How do you present yourself? What stories are you telling yourself before you walk into the room? Or it might be that they've got a challenge within their own workplace and they're coming to their mentor to say, I'm faced with this challenge. How would you handle it? What would you do differently? And again, I reflect on the reason that I set up Women in Safety was to have that exact conversation. Like, look, I'm finding this really challenging, or if I'm this leader, they might be operational. It might be that our CEO is not on board. How do I bring him on the journey? That was the stuff I wanted when I first started, because I was faced with those challenges and I wanted a community that I could, or someone that I could ask that question to. So I feel like the structured mentoring program has given them, it's an 8-week all in, go hard with your questions, know where you start and know what you want by the end of that program. And, the emails, we did a bit of a check-in recently because we're wrapping up the first cohort, second cohort starting in October. But the feedback was just like, oh my gosh, the conversations we've had and the challenges I've overcome and the mindset shift is huge. Job done, hang up, walk away. Yes. Love it. So they're using it very much as a platform for growth, for development, and for really feeling inspired by one another, I feel.
Asking questions, I really honed in on that when you were saying that. I think one of the most important things that we can do as people is ask the right questions. And especially when we're thinking about career, what is the question, that we want to ask ourselves? What do we want? What do we want to achieve? What are our values? How are you seeing the women in the mentoring program? How are you seeing them change over this 8 weeks?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I think there's a few things, and I've got a mentee during this program in particular, and I was talking to her and she said, Alanna, she was like, my mindset has just changed because I made her stop, and part of the mentoring program is making them stop and identify exactly what you said, Megan. What are my values? And I think this again goes to everything we spoke about what makes us a safety professional. If we don't know what we stand for and what our values are, how do we deliver health and safety, right? And again, it's that leading from the front and showing up as the whole person at work. How do we expect our workplace to do it if we're not doing it? And so these mentees are getting this message, and I know all the mentors. Some of them I handpicked because I know that they've got incredible messages to share. Some applied to be mentors, and they had to go through, my checkoff to be like, do I think you would deliver the right message that aligns with what we're trying to achieve? And so I feel like as a collective, the mentees are all hearing this journey of learning, of being open. How do we ask those questions when they might feel impossible? And they're getting that mindset shift instead of being like, I couldn't, or that feels a bit daunting, or, someone else, I don't want to do, I'm not updating my LinkedIn. That seems too scary. The reframe for them is not about it being scary. It's about it being, how are we advocating for the next generation? How do we give people, how do we let them see what they want to be if we're not the ones that can do it? And I know that the mentors are helping shift those mindsets into less imposter syndrome, more leading from the front, leading authentically, and leading with that human approach. So, yeah, I definitely feel like we're seeing a few little dribs and drabs come through. I see it sneakily on the LinkedIn. So if they're listening, I can see what they're doing on LinkedIn, and I am so proud.
I think this explains the success. So the community is growing. I think this space is a safe space to have a genuine and honest conversation.
Why can't we ask the questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we learn so much more from it.
Yes. And when you look for women in safety for the next years, what do you see? What we can expect it?
Yeah, look, I have always said, at some point I'd love to hang up the banner because we have platforms like LinkedIn that we should be able to have conversations and share knowledge and learn from one another. Until women feel safe having those conversations, I will continue to provide platforms that do that. I will continue to provide a voice for those who perhaps aren't ready to speak. Not that they won't ever, but they're just not ready yet. So that could still be ongoing mentoring programs. We will continue to deliver the Women in Safety Awards because I think we can get very caught up in, when it goes wrong. We talk about, in universities, right? We always hear about the Piper Alphas and the Apollos and all the rest of it. Imagine if we talked about the Women in Safety Awards and the person that won Leader of the Year, and why did they win Leader of the Year is because they did X, Y, and Z, then talking about what went wrong. Why are we not celebrating and talking more about what went right? And I reflect on the Hunter Safety Awards. There is some incredible organisations in the Hunter Valley region that are absolutely kicking goals when it comes to health and safety. Imagine if that was in the university lectures instead of Piper Alpha about this is the process they went to. This is when consultation didn't work, but this is how they then changed that. This is a mentor and this is why they won Mentor of the Year. Imagine that conversation, not what went wrong all the time. So I'm dedicated to sharing that, to advocating, as I said, for the next generation to see it as a viable career. And we've got some really cool initiatives kind of coming up. And one of the resources we just delivered is a pathway into health and safety. And, there'll be people who will no doubt want to wring my neck, but a university degree is not the only pathway into health and safety. Shock, horror, please don't disconnect. But showcasing that there are viable pathways into health and safety, and it is multifaceted because there is not one direct path into this career. And if I can show that and show those pathways and go back to my statement of what you can't see, you can't be. If we can have more visibility, then they will be, and they will be successful professionals. So to be fair, more of what we're doing, but more of the celebrating health and safety, because I think it's so much more powerful than saying, look what went wrong.
You know, Alanna, a little while ago, you were sharing how someone had called you courageous for sharing something. And I've got to tell you, this conversation to me does feel courageous. And even if you don't like being called that, I want to say that I find you extremely courageous in everything that you're doing. The way that you are calling things out and asking so many questions that are challenging the status quo of the way people think. And you're doing it in such a straightforward type of way, and a way that's offering solutions to people. And so that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because of the type of person you are and the way that you are bringing people along with you. But oh my goodness, you're also challenging us. I felt a little uncomfortable at times as we've been chatting, because all of these questions that you are asking are the questions that I think are in many health and safety people's minds, but they're too afraid to say them. So I want to in particular call out, thank you for being so courageous, and thank you for continuing to raise these topics and to ask those questions, because we need more people to do this. And I'm so honoured to have you as a colleague and as a friend, and just to have conversations like this. I've so appreciate it. You probably have no idea.
Do you know what, Megan? I tell you what, though, first, thank you. I forget to say thank you because I tend to skip over the nice parts of that. It doesn't come without internal fear of what it can do, right? Because I know that there is an audience who still don't agree with what Women in Safety is delivering. And I have had many say, I'm only doing it for money. I'm only doing it, we're the bra burners. We're only here like women woo-woo, like, where's Men in Safety? I've had the high heel logo torn apart by women. And I'm like, at the end of the day, and for those that are listening and probably have looked at the logo and said, a high heel's not very safe. High heels date back to men in war that they needed a safety option to keep their feet in the stirrups. So they developed a shoe that had a heel as a safety mechanism to keep them on their damn horse. So men started heels as a safety thing. And then it became men in power to make themselves feel taller and more seen would wear high heels as a distinguishing factor. So how that then translates into the logo of Women in Safety is not only the reason there's a safety cone in it is because it was developed as a safety mechanism back in the day for male soldiers, because you didn't have females on the front line. So it's a safety mechanism, and it's a position of power, and it's a position of leadership. And I want those women to feel that elevation and to feel seen and as leaders in what they do. And for any woman or man that comes for that, I get excessively defensive over, because come to me with the facts, because the women in my community feel heard for one of the first time in their career, and I will continue to do it. So it comes with a hell of a lot of fear, but it comes with a hell of a lot of passion that backs it.
So thank you for the incredible conversation. Wow, amazing. I will reflect a lot about it. We just wrapped up another episode full of reflections and insights. Remember, every step you take toward care, leadership, and safe makes a real difference in the lives of those around you. The journey does end here. It continues every single day, and we want to walk it with you. So if this episode resonates with you, share it, spread the message, and join us in the upcoming episodes. Together, we can turn care into culture and culture into results.